Two men die, and at the exact instant when the final breath leaves their bodies, two awakenings occur. One opens his eyes in a place of absolute comfort. The other awakens in a setting of conscious and irreversible torment. It was not wealth that saved one, nor poverty that condemned the other. The fate of both was not sealed by the gold they possessed or the hunger they endured, but by something far deeper and more silent. Join us in the ancient and unsettling saga of Lazarus and the rich man, and discover which single decision, ordinary and almost invisible, truly made all the difference. In the folds of time, where records dissolve into memory and memory transforms into legend, there once existed a city shaped by sun and stone. A pulsating city built upon commerce, religious devotion, and deep divisions that were rarely spoken aloud. Its streets teemed with life. The ceaseless echo of sandals striking the dust blended with the cries of merchants vying for attention, the smell of freshly baked bread, and the incense rising from the temple. The constant bleating of lambs on their way to sacrifice reminded everyone that this was a city of faith, even if that faith was, more often than not, merely ritual. Along one of its main arteries, where the intense aroma of spices from Arabia mingled with the sweat of pack animals and the metallic sound of coins, two opposing worlds stood side by side. They were not separated by deserts, nor by walls, nor even by an impossible river to cross. They were divided by the thickness of a single cedar wood door, tall, heavy, and magnificently carved. A door that did not merely close off a house, but isolated a conscience. Inside lived a man to whom fortune had smiled since birth. History did not concern itself with preserving his name, for his identity was wealth itself. Let us call him Epulon, the festive one, for whom life had never refused anything. His awakening was not announced by sunlight, blocked by thick, embroidered curtains, but by the trained murmur of his servants. The first contact of his skin with the world each morning was the finest linen, brought by caravans from the distant looms of Egypt, a fabric so delicate it seemed more like mist resting upon the body. Over it, Epulon wore a tunic of deep, costly purple, a color reserved for royalty, dyed from the essence of thousands of mollusks. Every thread proclaimed power, status, and absolute disregard for cost. He did not dress out of necessity, but as affirmation. It was a daily declaration of his superiority over the common world. Polished bronze mirrors returned to him a carefully constructed image, not that of an ordinary man, but of a lesser god, an absolute sovereign within his small, closed universe. Every day of his existence was a banquet. He celebrated neither victories nor alliances nor sacred dates. He celebrated only the privilege of existing as himself. His table, carved from dark and exotic woods, groaned under the weight of the finest delicacies money could buy. Figs sweet as honey, dates stuffed with rare nuts, and fish brought still cold from the distant coast. The main course was always a work of sensory art, lambs slowly roasted with garlic and rosemary until the tender, succulent meat fell from the bone at the lightest touch of a silver knife. In the inner courtyard, adorned with murmuring fountains and mosaics depicting the deeds of gods and heroes, the air vibrated with music. Lyre strings, soft flutes, and discreet drums created an almost ethereal atmosphere. The carefree laughter of guests mingled with the constant clinking of silver cups, while conversations revolved around profits, properties, inheritances, and the minor scandals of others. Epulon lived enveloped in a bubble of pleasure, polished, comfortable, and perfect. A closed world, self-sufficient and completely blind, but every bubble has a limit, and the limit of his was the door. Outside, on the very threshold that separated abundance from oblivion, lay another man. To this one, history granted a name, Lazarus. His only possession was that name, and the weak, almost imperceptible breath that still resisted within his weary lungs. His body was not covered in linen, but in dust stirred up by the indifferent passing of carts. It was marked by open sores, a living map of pain, abandonment, and silence. His bed was no bed at all, but the hard, hot stone of the entrance, chosen not for comfort, but for a hope that grew more distant with each passing day. His music did not come from lyres or flutes, but from the persistent buzzing of flies drawn to his wounds. The midday sun beat down on Lazarus like a merciless hammer. There was no roof to shield him, no compassionate caress of a friendly shadow. His fragile body lay exposed, motionless upon the scorching stone, while the heat seemed to slowly draw out the little life that still clung to him. For him, the banquet taking place on the other side of the door was nothing more than a cruel fantasy, a tormenting vision his mind insistently recreated. The wind, indifferent to human suffering, carried to him gusts of the aroma of roasted lamb. The scent of seasoned meat crossed the street, seeped into his senses, and made his empty stomach twist into a knot of pain and longing. With every fiber of his being, Lazarus yearned for the crumbs, the forgotten scraps, the already gnawed bones that fell from the rich man's table. He did not desire abundance or fullness, he desired only to survive. But not even that was granted to him. His only company, his sole comfort in a world that insisted on turning its back on him, came from the stray dogs. Creatures just as despised, wandering without owner or shelter, yet in their simple animal instinct, they seemed to recognize a suffering greater than their own. They approached cautiously, their damp snouts exploring wounded flesh, and licked his sores, cleaning them with a strange and silent pity. Where men saw inconvenience, animals offered presence. At times, the great cedar door opened with a heavy creak, announcing the master of the house's departure. Epulon emerged, squinting against the intense light, while a servant hurried to cover him with a parasol. As he passed, his finely crafted leather sandal stepped just inches from Lazarus's trembling hand. On occasion, his gaze slid over the motionless figure at the entrance, but it was an empty gaze, one that did not register, did not recognize, did not linger. He saw only an indistinct shape, a heap of filthy rags, a visual blemish that marred the entrance of his magnificent house. Something inconvenient, yet insignificant. A problem that, with luck, would disappear on its own in time. To Epulon, Lazarus was not a man. He was an object, an imperfection in the perfect landscape of his life, as irrelevant as the cracks in the stones of the road. There was never a word spoken to him, never a coin tossed in distraction, never a gesture, no matter how small. Only constant silence and the infinite distance separating two worlds that existed on the same street. The door closed once more, and the feast went on. Time, indifferent to purple robes and rags alike, followed its inexorable course. The seasons changed, painting the sky with different shades of blue and grey, bringing cold winds and suffocating heat. Yet at the threshold of Epulon's house, the scene remained unchanged. Opulence on the inside, misery on the outside. Still, something subtle was beginning to change. Lazarus's breathing grew ever more shallow. His eyes, sunken and dull, remained closed for longer stretches, seeking refuge in the brief moments of a feverish sleep. Hunger was no longer a sharp pain, but a heavy, muted emptiness, like an ember slowly consuming itself from within. His body, exhausted from resisting the inevitable, was beginning to yield. One afternoon, as the aroma of roasted lamb once again drifted from the rich man's courtyard, a young servant stepped out to pour away a jug of wine left over from the banquet. His eyes met Lazarus's, who, in a final effort, had managed to lift his head slightly. For a brief instant, the young man did not see a nuisance or a plague, but a man. Moved by a quick, furtive impulse, he hid a piece of bread beneath his tunic and discreetly let it fall near Lazarus's hand. But Epulon's gaze, keen when it came to discipline and control, was watching from the window. A voice sharp as a whip cracked from inside the house, not against Lazarus, but against the servant. The boy shrank back and fled in haste, leaving the bread to fall into the dust. Lazarus did not have the strength to reach it. That small act of kindness, born and extinguished in a single instant, was the last connection Lazarus would have with the world of men. A brief, almost invisible act, one that did not change his condition nor relieve his hunger, yet remained as the final human thread before the definitive silence. As the sun slowly set, staining the clouds with deep, almost blood-red hues, Lazarus felt the cold of the stone seep into his weakened body. The hardness of the ground no longer troubled him. There was no more pain. The wounds ceased to burn. The hunger that had cried out within him for so long dissipated, like a flame extinguished for lack of air. The noise of the street grew distant. Voices, footsteps, animals, everything faded into a far-off murmur, like the vague memory of an echo lost in time. A strange, unfamiliar peace, a lightness he had not felt in years, began to surround him. The weight of his body vanished, as if gravity itself had lost the right to bind him to that world. He closed his eyes for the last time, and in the darkness behind his eyelids, he did not find the emptiness so many fear. He saw a gentle, warm light, like a dawn rising silently on the horizon. He sensed the presence of beings who did not walk upon the dust of streets, figures of comfort and strength, whose mere nearness dissolved all fear. There were no trumpets, no solemn announcements, only a serene passage, a soul released from the prison of flesh. Lazarus's body was found the next morning. The city guards removed it without ceremony, as part of a banal routine, merely a necessary formality to clear the entrance of an important citizen's house. No one wept, no one put on mourning. To the world, it was as if just another stone had been removed from the road. Weeks later, a piercing scream shattered the calm inside the mansion. Epulon, the man who celebrated every day as if it were eternal, was struck down by a sudden, violent fever. The illness respected neither his walls, nor the finest linen, nor the weight of his fortune. It cast him onto the very bed where he had slept for so many years in absolute security, now transformed into a battlefield. The finest physicians in the region were summoned. They filled the room with the bitter smell of herbs, oils, and ointments, and with the sound of anxious, futile whispers. The rich man, accustomed to giving orders and being obeyed without question, was now a prisoner of his own body. The purple of his tunic was replaced by sheets soaked with sweat. He fought with the fury of a dethroned king. He clung to life with the same greed with which he had clung to gold. He cursed the physicians. He promised fortunes to gods in whom he scarcely believed. He tried to bribe death itself, as if it were merely another business partner willing to negotiate. But death does not negotiate. In his final moments, surrounded by relatives already calculating inheritances and alliances, his eyes flew open, seized by a primordial terror. He did not see a welcoming light, but a dense darkness that seemed to gather in the corners of his luxurious chamber, a living shadow with an insatiable thirst. His last breath was not a sigh of peace, but a rattle of panic. His death, unlike Lazarus's, was an event. Professional mourners filled the house with lamentation. Messengers were sent throughout the city to announce the tragedy. The grandest funeral the city had seen in years was prepared, a final, desperate display of a wealth that no longer served him at all. A long procession advanced down the main street. Hired mourners tore their garments. Speeches extolled his supposed generosity and virtues. His embalmed body was laid in a rock-hewn tomb, sealed for eternity. The procession passed exactly over the place where Lazarus had died, without anyone noticing the profound irony of that moment. Thus, two men departed the world. One, stripped of everything, was carried in silence to a place of comfort. The other, who had once owned everything, was escorted not by silence, but by pomp and vanity, toward what he imagined to be rest. The earth had already spoken its final word over both of them, but their story, their true saga, was only just beginning. The darkness of the tomb was dense, absolute, a silence of stone and compressed earth. Yet that silence began to fracture, not by an external sound, but by the brutal impact of a consciousness awakening. Epulon awoke, not to life, but to a terrifying lucidity. He was not in his sepulchre. The cold of stone had been replaced by a dry, suffocating heat that seemed to rise from the core of his own being. The air was heavy, unmoving, laden with echoes of distant lamentations, a continuous chorus of anguish vibrating in the gloom. He tried to open his eyes, but there was nothing to see. It was not the absence of light, but a living darkness, oppressive, almost tangible. He tried to move, but he had no body. He tried to speak, but he had no tongue. There remained only an exposed mind, a naked memory, trapped in a state of conscious torment. Then he felt the thirst. It was not the common thirst of the body, not the dryness of mouth or throat. It was a thirst of the soul, and searing longing for relief, for rest, for a single drop of hope. An inner fire that no water could quench. The emptiness of a lifetime turned inward upon itself had now become his only reality. In his desperation, his perception stretched beyond his own suffering, and, at an impossible distance to measure, he sensed a rupture in the darkness. It was not a sun, nor a violent flame. It was a serene light, calm and steady, like the glow of dawn in a world without pain. As his new way of perceiving adjusted, the distant scene grew clearer. It was not a palace of gold, but a living place, a field of rest and peace. And there were figures there. One stood out with ancestral dignity, a beard white as snow and eyes heavy with ancient wisdom. It was Father Abraham, and reclining beside him, in the place of honor and comfort, was another man. Epulon strained his perception, trying to recognize him. The man wore simple, clean garments. His body was whole, without wounds, without scars. His face, once shaped by pain, now reflected a deep, serene, and complete joy. A chill ran through Epulon's essence, colder than the tomb itself. It could not be. It was impossible. But the truth imposed itself with crushing clarity. That man at peace was Lazarus, the beggar, the one rejected at his door. In that instant, the universe inverted. The rules of the world he had mastered, the hierarchies of wealth and power, were pulverized. The one who had been last had become first. The one who had longed for crumbs now partook in a banquet of eternal peace. And he, the host of feasts, found himself on the outside. In the darkness, a whirlwind of emotions consumed him. First, disbelief, then powerless rage. How could that man, that ignored wretch, receive such a reward? Envy, a poison he had never tasted in life, now gnawed at him, feeding his torment. Then, like lightning, a memory struck him with cruel sharpness. He saw himself leaving his house, the purple tunic billowing in the wind. He saw Lazarus on the ground, lifting a trembling hand. He remembered his own expression of disdain, the gesture made to the guards to keep the beggar away. That moment, so trivial and irrelevant when it happened, now replayed endlessly in his consciousness. Every detail burned like an ember. The buzzing of flies, Lazarus's pleading gaze, his own cold indifference. And then he understood. His fate had not been sealed in death, but in thousands of small moments like that one. The rage dissolved, leaving behind only a deep, humiliating despair. Pride, the silent engine of his entire life, shattered into fragments. For the first time, Epulon felt the need to beg. For the first time, he looked upon another being not as inferior, but as the only distant possibility of relief. He gathered every fragment of what still remained of him, every residue of his wounded consciousness, and found a voice. It was not the voice of a host, nor of a master, nor of a man accustomed to being obeyed. It was a voice he had never used in life, the voice of a true beggar. A rough sound, broken by thirst and anguish, hurled in an attempt to cross the unfathomable chasm that separated him from mercy. Then he cried out, a sound that crossed the void, an echo of pure and absolute desperation. And in his cry, he spoke a word he had never spoken with sincerity while he lived, a word that now became his only fragile hope. Father Abraham, have mercy on me. I beg you to send Lazarus, that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. Even in the midst of agony, his old arrogance still survived. He asked that Lazarus, once again, should serve him. From the other side, Abraham's voice replied. It was not a voice of thunder or condemnation, but of deep and steady sorrow. It sounded like a father explaining a painful and unchangeable truth to a son. Son, remember. Remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, your banquets, your purple garments, your pleasures. And Lazarus, in the same way, received evil things, hunger, sickness, contempt. Now it is right that he is comforted here, and that you are tormented. The word remember became the very center of his suffering. His memory, once a treasury of pleasures, turned into a gallery of moral failures. Every banquet became an accusation. Every luxurious tunic, a shroud that suffocated him. Memory no longer offered refuge. It had become the flame itself. Then he understood the purpose of his condition. He saw the great chasm that separated them, a fracture in existence itself, an absolute void that no plea could cross. Divine justice did not reveal itself as vengeance, but as the natural harvest of the seed he himself had planted throughout his life. Defeated in his first request, a new panic seized Epulon. It was no longer only fear for himself, or perhaps it was his final form of selfishness, the desire that his lineage would not share his fate. He thought of his house. He thought of the life that continued without him. He thought of his 5 brothers, brothers who, at that very moment, might be celebrating a banquet in his memory. Men who had learned from him to love wealth and ignore the poor. Men walking, blindfolded, down the same path that had led him to ruin. With renewed urgency, he cried out again. His voice now carried a desperation that sounded almost altruistic. I beg you, Father, send Lazarus to my father's house. I have 5 brothers. Let him warn them, so that they may not also come to this place of torment. Abraham's reply came once more, patient yet unyielding. They have Moses and the prophets. Let them hear them. His voice carried a fundamental truth. Everything necessary for a righteous life had already been revealed. The warnings were written, preserved on sacred scrolls, read week after week in the synagogues. But Epulon, remembering the religious indifference of his brothers, an indifference he himself had helped to shape, insisted one last time. His argument was that of a man who had always trusted in spectacle, in the extraordinary, in what could be seen, touched, and feared. No, Father Abraham, Epulon pleaded, but if someone goes to them from the dead, then they will repent. An undeniable sign, a visible miracle, an impossible proof to dismiss. That they would believe. Abraham's sigh seemed to pass through eternity. His final answer came not as rebuke, but as the deepest and most terrible of truths, a revelation about the stubbornness of the human heart. If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead. Abraham explained that his brothers did not lack evidence, but willingness to believe. A specter from beyond would be dismissed as a nightmare, a hallucination brought on by wine, or the trick of a charlatan. They would always find a convenient explanation, any reason that would allow them to remain as they were, because to change would mean renouncing the banquets, the purple, the very life they loved. With those words, the dialogue ended. Silence fell again, heavier, more final than before. Epulon understood at last the ultimate truth. The door of mercy had not been closed by divine cruelty, but because the key, repentance, could only be used in the world he had left behind. Now, only the abyss remained. The final words of Abraham did not echo like thunder. They fell into the stillness of the hereafter, with the immovable weight of a gravestone sealing a tomb. There was nothing more to discuss. There was no possible appeal. Judgment was not a future event. It was a present condition, forged by an entire lifetime of accumulated choices. Epulon watched, paralyzed by an even deeper form of horror, as the figure of Abraham slowly turned away, not in anger, not in contempt, but with the final serenity of a season that has reached its end. And with him, Lazarus turned as well. His face was no longer directed toward the misery from which he had come, but was completely immersed in the peace that now dwelled within him. The serene light that surrounded them did not go out. It simply began to withdraw, receding across the abyss, growing ever more distant. To Epollon, it was like watching the last sun in the universe sink beyond the horizon, leaving him in a darkness deeper and more absolute than any he had ever known. Now, he was truly alone. Before, his torment had been the fire of thirst and the weight of memory. Now, added to these was the torment of knowledge. He knew that comfort existed, but it was unreachable. He knew that peace was real, but not for him. The door had not merely closed, it had vanished. The memory of his brothers was no longer a plea, but another face of his agony. He saw them with terrifying clarity. He saw their future as if it were already written, because he himself had taught them how to write it. The scene in eternity dissolved, and the focus of the story returned to the world of the living, the only place where choices still matter. In Epollon's great mansion, life went on, at least on the surface. His 5 brothers had inherited his fortune, and with it, his customs. At that moment, they were reclining in the same hall, celebrating a banquet. Wine flowed abundantly. Laughter echoed with the same emptiness. They spoke of business, of lands, of expansion. From the street below, the voice of a preacher rose, one among many who passed through the cities, speaking of justice for the poor and the judgment of God. One of the brothers made an irritated gesture and ordered the windows closed to muffle the nuisance. Outside at the door, in the very place where Lazarus had once lain, there now sat a widow, begging for alms. The servants, obeying old orders that had never been reconsidered, made sure she did not come near. They had Moses and the prophets, but they had closed their ears. Abraham's warning lingered in the air, unseen yet powerful. Even if the ghost of their own brother were to appear in the middle of the banquet, his eyes filled with the terror of the beyond, they would find a convenient explanation. They would call it indigestion, too much wine. They would offer him water, send him to bed, do anything except listen. They would seek every possible justification to avoid the one truth that truly mattered. Their lives needed to change. But their hearts, just as Epollon's had been before them, were hardened by comfort and blinded by the seductive glow of gold. The saga of Lazarus and the rich man does not end in the afterlife. It ends here, in the world of the living. It ends at the threshold of every door, in the daily decision to see or to ignore. It ends in the choice between listening to ancient wisdom or drowning it out in the constant noise of one's own feasts. Because the great abyss is not formed after death. It is dug silently, day after day, with every act of indifference, with every opportunity for mercy that is rejected. It is an abyss we dig ourselves, or one we choose to cross while there is still time. The story of Lazarus and the rich man reminds us that the smallest decisions can produce the greatest echoes in eternity. If this story spoke to you, we invite you to be part of our community by subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. May God bless you, and see you soon.